Good evening. Welcome to the Abington Township Board of Commissioners preliminary budget meeting for Monday, November 30th. And may I have a roll call, please?
Here.
Spiegelman.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Shriver. Here. Bowman.
Here.
Placido.
Here.
Barron.
Here.
Gillespie.
Here.
Hecker.
Here.
Jones. Klein.
Here.
Here. May everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call on Township Manager Michael LaFever for a brief overview.
Thank you, President Luker. Good evening, Commissioners. I believe this is our fifth public session related to the 2016 budget. In addition, we had 3 executive sessions to discuss personnel as they relate to the budget. There are a number of motions before you this evening. The primary motion relates to the preliminary general fund budget. We need to approve the general fund budget this evening, so we have adequate time to advertise the preliminary budget and vote on a final budget prior to the end of the year. The proposed budget before you this evening is in the amount of $37,472,623, and contains a funding gap of $786,861. When the budget was initially proposed, it contained a funding gap of $1,116,861. The Board of Commissioners suggested the budget be reduced by $330,000 to bring the proposed tax increase into a more palatable level. It was originally suggested the funding reduction of $330,000 be attained through attrition, but after receiving public comment at our last budget meeting, I suggested we provide the department heads the opportunity to make those cuts on their own so we can have a more equitable distribution of the cuts, so there's equal sacrifice across the board involving all departments. The department heads have met twice on this issue and are actively working towards that goal. As a result, there may be some variation in the allocation of the final budget, but it will remain at the $37,472,623 if it's approved this evening. To close the $786,861 deficit will require a $35 tax increase for the average household assessed at $150,000. There's no increase proposed in our sewer or our refuse budgets. In addition to those motions, there's also a motion for this evening for our retiree health plan, workers' comp fund, our highway aid fund, and our tuition reimbursement fund. And lastly, we need a confirmation this evening on when we're going to meet, the date and time for the final budget meeting, so that notice can be contained in our legal advertising. Thank you, President Luker.
Thank you. Are there any comments from commissioners at this juncture? Commissioner Myers.
President Luker, before you go ahead with the agenda, I would like to offer a motion at the proper time.
If there are no comments, we can open it up for motions at this time. Okay. Commissioner Myers?
Thank you. I would like to move that in order to close the gap in the budget for next year, that we increase the budget we increase the taxes by $30 per year. And the balance would be taken out of fund balance to cover and act as a buffer for next year, but at the same time, work with each and every department to economize, find efficiencies and savings, possibly create new revenue streams, and examine, and we can call it reorganization. Everything that I'm saying is not new. We can call it reorganization through possible attrition, but not forced. This would provide each of the departments a year, if you wanted to make it 6 months, but a year to work on these cuts, and instead of having to look at this starting at the end of November for the end of December. I think this has been extremely unfair to all of the department heads It's been horrible for morale for every department, for every employee in this building and the police department. I'd like to speak specifically to the police department. This does not mean that I don't feel this way about the other departments, but specifically to the police department and to fire. These are two departments that any cut that is made in any position, we may not see it immediately, but do not kid yourself. This will realize a service cut to our residents. And even 1 minute response time can feel like 100 to the person that's waiting for that officer. Our police department and our fire department are like insurance. You hope you never need it, but you keep paying for it every year just in case you do. So my motion is a $30 tax increase, take the balance as a buffer out of fund balance, and begin looking stringently at each department starting in January, and I so move.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other motions on the, Commissioner Klein?
Yeah, I'll make a motion for the original proposal that was presented in front of us, which is a $35 tax increase, and the gap be funded, or the budget be reduced by the amount of roughly $330,000 through the process that the manager and the finance director has already been working on for the last week, and we've been working on in the finance committee for the last 7 months and talking to department heads and trying to find those efficiencies, those cost savings between now and the final budget meeting, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. Are there any other motions on the floor? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the floor to proposals for the budget. At this time, before we vote on that, I'd like to open it up for any comments from commissioners. Any from staff? Any from residents?
I have a comment.
Right, Commissioner Myers.
I'd like to make a comment on the budget that I did not propose. Well, Vice President Klein is correct about looking at the different departments and through the Finance Department, and I'm pretty sure that I was present for all of them. I don't think that it was really relayed to each of those departments, or they understood, or really even had all that much time to prepare. And I know in the case of the library that they were informed just a week or so before their meeting. I don't know about the other departments, but it wasn't really relayed to them that they were going to have to make cuts. In fact, we went into this budget not knowing that any cuts would have to be made, and we were at $25. And then because something happened with the prescription plan, then the $25 was off the table. So we all went into this budget thinking it was going to be a $25 increase, and it isn't. I personally was fine with a $25 increase. That I knew the residents in the ward that I represent would be able to handle, hopefully. But I don't think that it's as simple as that we've been working on this since April.
Okay, any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Zappone.
I want to make a comment, actually a statement before we vote on this budget. Okay, something that's been on my mind for 2 or 3 weeks. I took a survey. 86% of my ward say no tax increase. 86% of the residents in Ardsley say no to a tax increase. Okay? So I'm just going to read a little statement before the vote is cast. And it says, no political party controls me, or no political party controls Ardsley. The residents of Ardsley control Ardsley. I will not tolerate myself or my community being threatened by any political party. And when I cast my no vote for a property tax increase, My residents or my community better not be held hostage or victimized by any political party, or my community better not suffer any harm from that vote that will affect the safety and welfare of my community. If an assault is lodged against my community, the likings of a Philly street fight will ensue, and my community will become victorious. Every vote I cast is from my heart and in the best interest of my community, and that's the way my mother raised me. This is the United States of America, and everyone has a right to vote, and that vote will never, never be violated by anyone, so help me God. That's my statement.
Thank you. Commissioner Hecker.
Thank you, President Luker. I wanted to make a comment. Last year, this board unanimously passed a policy guiding the use of our fund balance. At the time, it was commented that this was a good policy setting us up for the future. I am cognizant of the myriad concerns on every side of this budget discussion, but I am deeply concerned about continuing down the path of using our savings to pay for ongoing costs. At some point, the bill comes due, and these are hard decisions to make. But if we were to take $430,000 out of our fund balance, we have a bigger delta to make up at the beginning of next year before we can put money aside to fund the much-needed capital projects in the township and to fund our obligation to our retirees' benefits. And if you could tell me, Manager Lefevre, what is that number, the beginning delta next year, if we were to take this out of fund balance?
Could you use the microphone, Michael?
Under the fund balance policy, it's the minimum and maximum levels are not set amounts. They're tied to a percentage of the budget.
Right.
The minimum is 1 month of expenditures, the maximum is 3 months of expenditures. So as the budget grows each year, those limits grow as corresponding level. So assuming the board adopts the preliminary budget at the proposed level, the maximum fund balance policy would grow by, the limit would grow by about $289,000. So if we were to take the $430,000 from fund balance, we'd have to replenish that $430 plus the additional $288. So it comes to approximately $719,000 that we'd have to refund in the fund balance through, hopefully, a 2015 surplus.
Right. And that's before any money would be available to replenish the permanent improvement fund from which we're drawing upon to fund the capital projects that improve the quality of life for residents throughout the township.
That's correct. The first amount of money would have to first go to fund balance to replace before anything could be used for capital improvements or for OPEB obligations or to support the next year general fund budget.
So I respect the differences of opinions that exist on the board. For me, this is not political. It's not any of that. It's simple math. And I recognize that this presents challenges to our departments and our department heads. We're talking about 0.8% of the overall budget, and I think we can collectively figure out a way to do this that doesn't disrupt service and that benefits the residents in a positive way. And so I'm going to be voting for the $35 tax increase.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Spiegelman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, I think it was last week, it's all kind of blurring, maybe it was the week before, we had folks, when cuts of a different configuration were proposed to help balance this budget deficit, we had folks come out and say, with reference to the $49 tax increase that would have been necessary to close the deficit only with tax increase, with no other methods. People came out and say, you know what, they're specifically talking, of course, about the police department, about the library, and folks came out and said, you know what, tax me the full $49, tax me double. It's that important. And I had actually proposed, I'd shared with my colleagues a plan, in effect did that. I'll fully own up to having proposed a significantly larger tax increase, the 49 as opposed to the 35 that is, that we're talking about today, or the 30 that Commissioner Myers proposed. Ultimately, it is true, as Commissioner Myers said, I don't think anyone necessarily expected this to be a budget where we would have these dire choices. There were some surprises. But ultimately, I think that this plan, the plan that Commissioner Klein formally proposed, the one regarding the $35 increase. I think because the cuts that it suggests are a little bit broader based. There is pain all around, but it doesn't unduly or disproportionately balance the budget on the backs of individual departments rather than going for a broad base. I think it is the most reasonable compromise that does not involve dipping into fund balance yet again. And as Commissioner Hecker said, and as Manager Lefevre backed up with the numbers, every dollar we take from fund balance, it's almost $2 we have to deal with next year in the hole before we do anything else. And that could lead to truly irresponsibly drastic cuts in services. And we have to, if we don't stay ahead of that, as we tried to do with the fund balance policy that Commissioner Hecker mentioned, we passed a year ago, if we don't stay ahead of that, it will bury us. So this is why I also support what I consider the compromise position of the $35 average tax increase. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Vice President Klein.
So back in June, when we started meeting with department heads in the Finance Committee, prior to that, we circulated a list of questions to the Finance Committee and finalized that list of questions. And three of the questions, to Commissioner Meyer's point, that were on that list. The first one is, be prepared to discuss cost savings in your department, including but not limited to reducing staff, increasing efficiencies, limit expenses above normal operations, etc. All ideas should be presented. The next one is, what methods could you implement that would develop greater efficiencies and more cost-effective services? And the last one is, look at department fees and update. Compare them to other townships. These questions have been vetted. These questions have been asked. They were discussed at length in the Finance Committees from June to September. I think we met with department heads. So this information was gathered by the Finance Committee in depth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President.
Commissioner Miles.
Vice President Klein is absolutely correct. And not one of those departments left that meeting charged with, that's not good enough, go back and find more.
Okay. Commissioner Farron.
Thank you, President Luker. The thing that's been giving me the most pause is probably the prescription costs. I agree with the proposal we put forward last year for the fund balance. I think that makes sense. And I'm not generally in favor of dipping into the fund balance. It's just a blanket cover-all for the budget. We've been doing that for years, and we've seen the numbers of what's going to happen if we continue to do that. But we also put in that very same policy that we could cover up to 10% in case of a situation that we were not prepared for or that came out of the left field, and I think that's kind of what the prescription costs are. They were a large cost out of left field that we weren't quite prepared for. I've been asking myself if that 10% is specifically designed for something like this. It's what's been giving me pause in terms of how to go forward moving with the budget. I wonder if, as Commissioner Hecker said, because I agree it's a small amount of percentage, if we put our heads together, we could cover that delta and make up that change and be fine moving forward next year. It really is for me that last unexpected, maybe not the 11th hour, but the 10th hour of raise in cost of prescription to such an extent that our budget, which we thought we'd brought down by great work by our township manager and our finance director to somewhat of a manageable number, ballooned back up to over $1 million. And that for me and for a lot of people in Ward 12 at least seems to be the issue. I sent some information out to residents. I had one person who said not a single cent more in taxes. I had somebody else said raise it $50 or $100 and don't cut any services whatsoever. Most people kept asking, why do we have $9 million in the bank and we're going to raise taxes and we're going to cut services? They seem to ask me, why couldn't we find some kind of a compromise in terms of maybe some tightening of the belts in different departments, raising a little bit of taxes, but then using our fund balance in such a way that we can judiciously move forward throughout the course of next year and address those changes so that we're not going to have to do this every single year. I like the policy that we have in place, and I'd like to move to a point where we don't have to dip into the general fund balance, and I don't know if that requires, I don't want to create more work for us, but a separate budget committee whose job is January 2nd to get to work and be this a little bit more direct so we don't have maybe a difference of understanding as we're hearing when we charge our department heads with what to do in terms of the budget for 2017, and whose job it will be to specifically analyze expenditures, where there are cost-cutting savings measures available, and what revenue streams there might be. But absent that, if we're going to go through the same process again next year, where we go through until August, and then we start putting our paperwork together, and then we start having our meetings, which is fine, we're going to find ourselves in a situation like this again. And I'm much more in favor of finding some kind of a compromise and then getting to work January 2nd so we can address this issue sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hecker?
I appreciate that perspective. I just want to clarify, though, that the fund balance policy, and this is something that I've seen circulated over the weekend, the fund balance policy does not state that we can use 10% of the fund balance to be applied toward the following year's operating budget. We are actually using the 10% from the overage from last year that's being applied to offset the deficits. So anything, could we just explain that?
Yes, fund balance policy requires a minimum and maximum, a minimum 1 month, maximum 3 months. The 10% figure, it applies to the year-end surplus. Under the fund balance policy, any year-end surplus above the maximum level of the fund balance policy is to be distributed between our permanent improvement fund, our OPEB obligation, and 10% reserved to support the following year budget. So the 10% figure is of the annual surplus, not of the total fund balance.
And that's already in this year's proposed budget.
It is.
Okay. Commissioner Jones?
Thank you. When I look at the compromise and the compromises, the one issue that I don't think we're taking into account is what are you using any potential fund balance funds to purchase. Common sense would say you're purchasing goods and services, you're allowing for salaries to be paid, and you're kind of bridging that financial divide. My concern is that we need to use it as a safety net to purchase time. So when you look at structurally all of the ideas that are put forth, they make sense on paper. Commissioner Klein brings up a very good point about the department heads coming in individually and being asked about cost savings and potential ways to tighten the belt and sharpen the pencil. And that makes sense. But the reality is, to get to the cuts that we're talking about now that are definitive cuts is going to require all of the department heads to come together, to work together to identify cuts. It's a job that I believe they can do. Is it a job that they can do in a short period of time that's being allotted to them? Is it a job that they can do when there is additional information that in 90 days, 120 days, will actually help to better inform them on which decisions to make? So I believe utilizing the fund balance as a safety net so that the department heads have the ability to work together and to work together to not only deal with this budget, but to create a new structural paradigm as how the township is going to move forward. This is not something that's going to be solved budget to budget, department to department. It's going to have to be a holistic approach. And if this has not been done year after year after year, from a humanistic side, how our department heads are going to work together is going to take time. My fear is that if the cuts that are needed are mandated to be made by the end of this calendar year, do our department heads have enough time? Do they have enough information? So that if you find yourselves right back here, we're in the same place next year, but we've made decisions that were forced upon department heads, you're going to have to unravel those decisions and then fix them again. So I'm in favor of utilizing the fund balance as a stopgap, allowing the department heads to have 3-4 months to make the necessary cuts. If some of those cuts fall short, then you use some portion of the fund balance as a rainy day fund, which is, it's like your house budget. That's what a fund balance is used for. That's what I will be supporting. That's what I think makes sense. It creates a shared sacrifice and a shared success for the township. And I think it gives the department heads not only the information, but the time to make the excellent decisions that we're all expecting them to make.
Thank you. Commissioner Klein?
Yeah, Michael, so we have, last year we started with the fund balance policy, and we peeled off a certain amount of money, which funded a permanent improvement fund, basically a separate subsect of our capital fund. And that we're using now to fund any capital expenditures that were ordinarily put in the operating budget. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that, the way we budgeted that was somewhere between $500,000 and $600, $500,000 to $600,000 a year, right? Roughly.
Depending on the year-end surplus,
Right.
yes.
So
That's
this
a
year,
reasonable expectation.
this year we talked about, capital expenditures of about $684,000 coming out of that specific permanent improvement fund, correct?
That's correct.
So that's already money somewhat coming out of the fund balance because we were able to peel that portion off and dedicate it, so we didn't have to deal with that portion of the capital expenditures in our operating budget.
That's correct. The annual contribution to the Permanent Improvement Fund has actually been deleted from the budget 2 years ago to lower the impact of any proposed tax increase at that time. We're spending on the average about $1.4 million a year in capital expenditures. We do have some dedicated funding going towards that expense, but it's only about 45% of the total allocation. So the hope was by replenishing the Permanent Improvement Fund by a percentage of any surplus on an annual basis, it could continue that fund at least long-term, maybe 8, 10 years, maybe perhaps even longer. If we don't replenish the fund, we're going to deplete it completely within 4 to 5 years.
So, and the other point to make is that we're already taking money basically out of the fund balance because we were able to push that aside and save it for the next, hopefully, like you said, 8 to 10 years.
That's
So
correct.
we're already funding about $700,000 out of previous fund balances.
That's correct.
And then my other question, I just lost it. If I think of it, I'll come back.
Any other questions? Commissioner Kolonowski.
So, Michael, you said 1 month is the minimum, 3 months is the maximum. Can you give me the numbers on that 1 month and the numbers on the 3 months?
I have the maximum based on the proposed budget is approximately $9,451,000.
Yeah.
I don't have the minimum in front of me.
Which is, yeah. Now, I understand we put money back into the fund balance last year. Do you project anything going back in there this year?
Well, we'll have to, as the limits grow, as the budget grows, we'll have to put $289,000 based on the size of the proposed 2016 budget to reach the maximum level. So the first $289,000 of any surplus will go to replenish the fund balance.
Okay.
I did think of that question.
Vice President Klein.
It was mentioned that, giving them more time, department heads working. You've already met with them. Are you confident that you can come up with the less than 1% cuts that we're talking about before the final budget meeting?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Commissioner Myers.
Michael, if you had 3 months, 6 months more to work with the departments, do you think that you could do a better job? We can ask leading questions all night long.
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jones.
I'll rephrase that, not to ask a qualitative, but do you think with additional time, you'll have better information to make more informed decisions in terms of any potential savings or any potential pitfalls that may identify themselves?
Depending how far out you extend the time frame, we will have final figures for 2015 expenditures. We'll have audited figures, so we'll know how we finish this year. Whatever surplus will be determined, and we'll know the implications for our fund balance policy and our OPEB obligations, as well as the amount for 2017. So we'll have additional information depending on how far you defer the decision.
Your Honor, I would ask if that would count as a yes, correct?
Commissioner Shriver.
And if we go out that far and it is taken out of the fund balance with the proposed proposal that Commissioner Myers put forward, if we take it out of the fund balance for, say, 6, 9, 12 months, what would be the possible impact on a tax increase for next year?
Well, as I stated in the beginning, I think Commissioner Hecker raised the question, if you take $430,000 out of the fund balance plus have to contribute an additional $289,000, you're looking at $719,000 hole you created for 2017 that has to be filled before you have any money going to any of your obligations. So you're creating a hole for 2017 that you'll be in a much more difficult position to address. Without factoring any increase in spending whatsoever, you'll have that hole to begin with.
So there will most likely then have to be a tax increase for next year as well.
I would think so.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Thank you. So with either plan, there could most likely be a tax increase next year, is that correct? Because most likely is a big quotes on each end.
Well, as the board is aware, we have an ongoing problem with our revenues are not keeping pace with our expenditures. It's an ongoing problem we face for a number of years. We've cut everywhere possible, but 76% of our budget is directly tied to personnel. So without addressing that large component of our expenditures, it's hard to avoid a tax increase. By adopting the proposed budget as motioned by Commissioner Klein, we're removing the dependency on the fund balance. This year, we used $521,000 to close the funding gap. So we start off with that hole when we started the budget process for 2016. You won't have that deficit to address under the initial proposed motion this evening.
It just seems to me, and I should have asked this question before anyway, I know all of a sudden we've got the prescription plan that doubled, and that was late coming to us. And do we have to, and I know we have to stick with them now, I'm sure, but would that be something that could be changed in the coming year?
There were a number of things I mentioned at our last budget meeting that we're looking at. We have already changed our prescription plan manager that's managing the plan for us. The board approved that motion at our last meeting. We're also looking at an insured product. The likelihood of that being cheaper is remote at best. There are several other alternatives we're looking at in relation to the prescription plan to try to reduce costs.
Okay.
I have a question. Michael, you made a statement that revenues are not keeping pace with expenditures, and that's been declining for the last couple of years, correct? Or stagnant?
Yes, certain components of our revenue stream are stagnant. Our real estate tax base, we're probably 95, 97% developed, so there's no growth in our real estate tax base. The last reassessment was 18 years ago by the county, and that makes up about a third of our revenue. So without any growth in our real estate taxes, we're more depending on other revenue sources, primarily business taxes, permit fees, things of that nature. And unfortunately, that two-thirds of the budget is not sufficient, the growth in those revenues, to keep pace with normal expenditures. When the budget, 76% of your budget being tied to personnel, there's normal cost increases in accordance with collective bargaining agreements, with benefit changes, health benefit costs continue to rise. So we've done everything possible to try to contain that growth, to minimize the growth, but they still are exceeding our revenue stream.
And you don't foresee any large real estate transactions in 2016 that'll bring in some exorbitant revenues?
If the mall would change hands 4 or 5 times during the year, we'd get a huge windfall in real estate transfer tax, but that's not expected to occur.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, I think I asked for comments from the staff or public. I'll ask one more time, any comments from the public? If there are, name and address, and you can limit your comments, please.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. I did miss that good exchange that you just had over
Could you speak up, Ms. Lehman?
Yeah, I just missed that good exchange you just had over the Permanent Improvement Fund, which I think is relevant to what I wanted to say. I'm sorry I missed that. But the first question I had is that I was sure, and I couldn't find it before I came tonight, but I was sure I saw somewhere that the OPEB obligation, each year that we don't pay it down, it's increasing so much. So my memory is that if we only put $1 million in, we actually are going to, that fund is going to increase something like $4 million. Am I correct on that? Am I wrong?
Public comment.
Because as long as that fund's there and we're putting $1 million in and it's increasing $4 million and we're getting $3 million or $4 million behind each year, am I off base totally on that?
Michael, did you want to comment on that, or?
Yes,
or
I don't have
have you
the
already done so?
I don't have the exact figures on our OPEB obligation in front of me, but Mrs. Lehman is partially correct. Our OPEB obligation have increased steadily over the last few years, and the primary reason is we continue to add new employees to our ranks that were entitled to post-retirement health benefits. But the Board of Commissioners discontinued that for new employees, new salary and clerical employees at the end of 2013, and for our per diem employees at the end of 2014. It still has to be addressed with our police personnel through the collective bargaining process, but by not adding additional employees that are entitled to that benefit, the cost of those benefits will be somewhat contained. There'll still be the normal inflation costs of benefits, but there won't be that exponential growth by adding new employees. It was almost an inverted pyramid. It just continued to grow and grow. So the board has taken aggressive steps to begin funding that. We have, I think, approximately $9 million now in our OPEB fund towards obligation, but there's still a significant unfunded liability that we continue to address.
Okay, good news. Thank you.
So exactly about how much is it going up this, in this next year, for instance?
It's hard to say. The OPEB fund is audited. There's an actuarial evaluation every 2 years. There'll be one January 1st of 2016, and we'll have better figures at that time. I'm in opposition to speculate on what the figure will be next year.
And I guess that's not crucial to this budget because it can be paid down in the long term, but
Well,
if...
can I follow up?
So-
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
so my understanding is, I mean, the OPEB obligation or underfunded is roughly around $35 million, is that correct?
The last valuation was approximately $36 million.
And that is over a 30-year period of time, roughly.
That's correct.
So, I mean, we're well-funded for what we have, for what our obligations are at our current point in time, correct?
Yes.
We can meet our obligations and then some.
And we're in a much stronger position than the other municipality that I'm aware of,
Right.
that we've taken proactive steps to begin addressing that obligation. As far as I'm aware, virtually every other municipality in Montgomery County is continuing to go on a pay-as-you-go basis and not really addressing the problem down the
And
road.
through the changes we've made, and also through the changes in the employment contracts that we've made, and also the money that we're putting away, we're actually putting ourselves in a better position as we go further, not to have to necessarily pay as we go.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, I appreciate it. So, one of the other things I wanted to point out, I was pretty outraged to see the way, you brought the people out to say, tax me, tax me. So I'm glad that you reduced it somewhat, but I would agree with Commissioner Jones that the way to do it right now is to use the stopgap from the fund balance and really go back and properly lay out the budget so all the residents of this township can help you. And I know because I have tried to get information, for instance, one page on Alverthorpe Park, one page on Briarbush, one page on Public Works streets, one page, and it might be 2 pages on some of them. But if somebody ask for a document to understand that area of the budget, the budget should be laid out for all of you in that kind of an efficient manner. So that would help the entire township then would be able to help oversee, and help you find ways, and you yourselves would be able to help find ways. The fluctuations alone in all the various things, the earned income tax that we'll have coming in, the value of real estate next year, and so on. All of that changes so much that for us to say we have a $1 million obligation and a deficit that we can't fill, I think as you saw several years ago, that was filled by January. That was changed by January. And this year you also saw that you had an $800,000 increase. You also had somebody testify at the podium that when the wellness center opens, your health care costs will probably go down. So those large fluctuations make it seem a little bit disingenuous to me to say we have this deficit and we have to fill it right now. Okay, so I would agree with Commissioner Jones. Let's use the buffer and then sharpen pencils and find out where the fat is, and there's lots of it in there. So the only other thing I wanted to say is I think everybody should be aware we had $117 increase of school taxes this year. So when you go up $30, you're going up to $147. And for those people that think it's okay to say tax me double, that would be $200 per family per year. Okay, so it's not just what happens in this room, it's what happens in the entire township. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from residents? Sir, name and address.
Good evening. Edward Halley. I'm the owner of 2122 Old Welsh Road. I just wanted to let you know, first and foremost, I wasn't planning on talking tonight. However, after listening to you, I want to thank all of you for your service as commissioners, elected officials. I want to thank everybody in Abington. It's a great place to work and to live. I wanted to just simply make a quick comment as opposed to the budget cuts. And I just wanted to let you know that the residents and all of us in Abington are in a very good position to have a good, high-caliber police department that serves the people and does a lot of things that other municipalities don't do. The things that your constituents have grown to love about us is the quick response, the ability to do things that most municipalities don't do. And what I wanted to just make sure you understand is, with all due respect, I've watched over the last 17 years the surrounding municipalities' police departments get decimated with personnel cuts. And I want you to understand it has profound morale impact. It opens up exposures to liability to the township. The less of us that are out there on the street doing the job and the less of us that are there to quell a situation quickly exposes us in the long term to some major stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that, again, respectfully to all of you, because I appreciate all of you, our command staff of this police department is of the best caliber. Our police department is of the best caliber, and I just respectfully hope that we can try to find a way to allow the command staff of the police department to find where cuts can be made. The morale of the police department, we're in bad times in this country, and the cops are out there doing a great job and really working hard for the residents. And before we start with any potential cuts of personnel, please, let's try to cut it as much as we can in other places and keep Abington a safe place where we can all be proud and you can all rest your heads and sleep well at night knowing that we're out there ready to give our lives and that we love this community very much. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from residents? Name and address, please.
Leslie Crawford, 421 North Tyson Avenue, Glenside. I just had a quick question. You guys are talking about a 30 to 35 flat, pretty much a flat tax, according to $150,000 of value in the home. Is that correct?
It's an assessed value?
Yes.
Right.
The assessed values in the county are roughly 54% of an appraised value.
I guess my question was, being kind of new to this process, is it possible to adjust that $35 up or down according to how much value you have in your home, or is that too difficult?
That's exactly what happens.
That's right.
We just use the $35 because the average assessed value in the township wide is $150,000, which is roughly $280,000 to $300,000 home value.
Right.
In other areas, it could be higher, they'll pay more taxes. In other areas, it could be lower, they'll pay less taxes. But the 35 we use in this conversation is just based on the average home value in the township.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gillespie.
That assessed value is on your tax bill, so if you don't, it is on there.
You want to repeat that? You said it's on the tax
The
bill.
assessed value is on your tax bill.
Okay, any other comments from residents?
And if you don't have your assessed value, you can always call the tax office and they'll provide it to you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from residents? If there are none, I'll go back to one last round of comments from commissioners. Commissioner Myers and
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Jones.
Actually, Manager LaFever, I have a question on the restricted fund balance, because we're always talking about the $9 million unrestricted, which is subject to the policy, but the unrestricted, the restricted, I know that we have several $1 million put away for the Tyson Edgehill project. Now, it's my understanding that once that project is completed, that we will be reimbursed a portion of that, or how much are we expected to get back from that from PennDOT? Because we had to put up a certain amount, right?
That is correct. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it is a significant number. Kevin, you?
Just for a percentage, we get 80% back of what we spend. So about 1.8 million, maybe 2 million still out there. As we spend it, we submit bills to the state, and the state reimburses us. As we all know, the state is in a budget crisis right now, so the money has not been coming back to us as quick as it has been spent, but it will come back as soon as they approve their budget. So as that comes back, that gets added back to the fund balance. So if we got $200,000 of expenses back, that would go back to the fund balance. So, but until we spend it, we're not going to get it back. So it's reserved or restricted.
We've had it restricted for a long time, and it's not been part of the discussion. But it is money that's going to come back and no longer be restricted.
Correct. And it has come down because that was over probably $3 million.
So, well, we can't look into the future and predict any great sales or big sales in Abington Township. We certainly do know that we are going to be getting money back at some point when this project is completed from PennDOT.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Jones, thank you.
Manager LaFever, I'm going to use a four-letter word that many people don't want to hear, but snow and ice. Can you tell me approximately what the swing is? When we had a couple of years ago the severe ice storms, when we had a lot of snow and a lot of power outages, what type of an overage? Because I recall that there was significant overage, and I'm not asking for exact numbers, but just in a ballpark, is that $10,000 overage, $20,000, or is it more along the lines of six figures?
I think it's, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but they're much closer to six figures. We had two very difficult winters. We had to go back to the board for additional allocations to support our snow removal activities, but they're much closer to six figures than $10,000 or $20,000.
So it is possible that if you have, luckily, I'll use the four-letter word again, a winter where there is only 3 inches total of snow, that might equate to some type of savings.
Absolutely.
But I'll add on that, that is a different fund. Okay,
so
that's
that
the
has-
Highway 8 fund. Okay, the Highway 8 fund, on the good news, is we were noticed that we were going to get more money next
Right.
year. So we did increase the snow budget if we were hit with snow.
So would that all be highway fund, or is any of that funding, all of that is overtime, everything personnel comes out of that?
As much as possible.
Okay. So the savings for potential overages would be de minimis?
Well, the savings would be for the following year for Highway 8 to be due, street patching, street lights, snow for the next year, so on and so on. So if the Highway 8 doesn't spend the whole budget, just like the general fund, the money goes back into the fund balance and can be used for whatever's needed. So if we're hit with a bad winter the following year, not this year, so yeah, it could be the same effect.
So that savings could only go back into,
The Highway 8 fund, correct. Just like the general fund can only be used for the general fund.
right, but that would be all of it, is my question. Is there anything that comes out of general fund for public works that's associated with wintertime activities? Or would that just be minimal?
We've taken care of that in the last week and a half.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and the closing
Hey,
comments?
let me just ask.
Commissioner Markman.
The overall budget, like Manager LaFever, how much is it? I just want to put the numbers out there.
$37,472,623.
The proposed budget cuts to basically with a $35 increase are how much?
$330,000, less than 1%.
So $330,000 out of $37,472,000
That's correct.
as proposed budget cuts.
That's correct.
$300,000 out of $37 million. Okay, thank you.
And what is that percentage? I couldn't quite hear you.
It's less than 1%. It's probably 0.8 of 1%.
And that is only the operating budget.
On the operating budget, okay. Okay, any closing, Commissioner Farron? You have-
Thank you, President Luker. Just real quick, because if we're going to take a vote on this, I want to be clear, and I want people to know that the vote is either, if I'm right, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's either a $35 increase and $330,000 in cuts, and that covers the $786,000 gap, or it's a $30 increase, no cuts in services, so that $330,000 is not addressed now, it would be addressed ostensibly later, and we would dip into the fund balance to cover the $430,000 gap differential, which would be there with the $30 tax increase.
That's my
Those are the two
understanding of the two
choices.
motions. That's correct.
And it's too late to make a motion?
Well, we did have
Yeah, we
two,
missed that.
and
It's
we
gone.
closed the floor for motions.
Yep, no, I just want to make sure.
Okay. I would say at this juncture, it is past that
I believe
time.
so.
Having said that, if there are no further comments, I think we're ready.
Is it possible that I could hear his motion, just for curiosity? If it's out of order, I'm okay with
I think it'd be out of order.
I'm saying, I was just saying, out of curiosity, I understand it's close to motion, but just out of curiosity, would it be possible to hear his thought process?
I think it would be out of order at
Okay.
this juncture.
Thank you.
In all due respect.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. We are about to vote, so if, having said that, the first motion was for, correct me if I'm wrong, a $30 tax increase per household assessed at $150,000, and the difference taken from fund balance, with department heads to look at cost savings in the future
Starting January 1st.
starting January 1st, 2016. The second motion on the floor is a $35 per household tax increase for a house assessed at $150,000, with $0 taken from the fund balance, and the remainder in budget cuts spread across the board and addressed by staff and department heads. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Any corrections on that? Hearing none, we'll take a vote by show of hands. First, the motion for a $30,000 tax increase per household.
$30,000.
That would solve the deficit.
I think we're okay there.
We solve that for the next 20 years.
$30, well, motion number one, the vote will be for a $30 tax increase per household assessed at $150,000, and the difference taken from the fund balance by show of hands. All those in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 in favor.
Okay. So there's no need to take the second, but we'll do it for,
You have to.
You have to do it.
Something has to pass, so I think we
You
have
have
to
to
take the
vote.
second vote.
okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So we'll take a vote on the second motion for a $35 tax increase per household with $0 taken from the fund balance and the remainder in budget cuts. All those in favor of that motion, show of hands.
9 in favor.
Okay, so what is that total?
9 in favor.
And the first motion?
First one was 5 in favor.
14.
Tax increase was 5 in favor. $35 increase was 9 in favor.
So we're
So
missing.
the second motion carried by a majority of the board.
Okay, so there was one vote for neither.
That's me.
Okay, just so for the record, Commissioner Zappone voted for neither option. Okay. All right, with that, I will read the preliminary budget. Okay. The general fund, the motion to adopt a balanced preliminary general fund revenue and expense budget for calendar year 2016 of $37,472,623, predicated on the passage of a tax increase. The sewer operating fund, motion to adopt a balanced preliminary sewer operating fund revenue and expense budget for calendar year 2016 of $9,130,956. The proposed budget for the sewer operating fund does not include a tax increase in sewer rent charges over the 2015 calendar year. The highway aid
Commissioner
fund.
Luker, on the sewer operating, if we could get a second to that motion and take a vote on each one of these
Oh, okay.
motions
Well,
separately.
we have to do we do the general fund, or do we need to do the general fund formally the way it's
Should do
written?
it formally.
What's that?
Should do it formally.
We could do each of them formally, although I think we know the outcome of the general
Right.
fund.
So one at a time?
Yeah, I'll do them one at a time, take a motion each
All
one.
right, so we'll go back to general fund. All those in favor?
Oh, I think you want to make the motion, I'll
You
second.
made a
it.
motion.
Motion to adopt a balanced preliminary general fund revenue and expense budget for calendar year 2016 of $37,472,623, predicated on the passage of a tax increase, and I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Show of hands, please. Opposed? Motion passes. Sewer Operating Fund, motion to adopt a balanced preliminary sewer operating fund revenue and expense budget for calendar year 2016 of $9,130,936. The proposed budget for the sewer operating fund does not include a rate increase in sewer rent charges over the 2015 calendar year, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Oh, wait, hold on a second. That should say over the 2016 calendar year.
Correct.
He's right.
That's correct.
And it's 9:56.
It would be the 15.
No, it's based on,
No, it's correct.
same rate as 2015.
Same as
The
2000.
way it's worded. Right.
And it's
So-
956,
Okay.
So it's correct as is?
It is correct.
Okay.
except for the amount.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Show of hands, please.
Nobody's opposed.
Nobody voted.
The Highway Aid Fund, motion to adopt a preliminary budget for Highway Aid Fund for the calendar year 2016 in the amount of $1,431,178. These funds are provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and require no additional funding from township sources, and I so move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Retiree Healthcare Fund. Motion to adopt a balanced preliminary retiree healthcare fund budget for calendar year 2016 in the amount of $1,348,700. Monies supporting this fund are contingent upon the passage of the general fund, sewer fund, and refuse fund budgets. Budgets include $200,000 in additional revenues to partially fund the OPEB obligations, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Tuition Reimbursement Fund, motion to adopt a preliminary tuition reimbursement budget for calendar year 2016 in the amount of $15,000 for expense budget and $5,000 in revenue. Difference of $10,000 is funded by principal cash, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Workers' Compensation Fund, motion to adopt a balanced preliminary workers' compensation budget for calendar year 2016 of $965,030. The difference between revenues and expenses, which is $284,030, will be funded from reserves. Monies supporting the Workers' Compensation Fund are contingent upon passage of the general fund, sewer fund, and refuse fund budgets, and I so move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The Refuse Fund, motion to adopt a balanced preliminary refuse fund reserve and expense budget for calendar year 2016 of $5,807,416. The proposed budget includes no rate increase on residential refuse fees as defined in Chapter 92 of the Code of the Township of Abington, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. That concludes
The only other item,
this
if we,
agenda item.
that concludes the motions, and we just can confirm when we're meeting again for the final budget meeting for adoption of the 2016 budget.
Michael, can you go over again how many days it has to be and when the soonest is that we can have this next meeting?
In the First Class Township Code, there's conflicting language. There's one sentence that refers to public notice being provided 10 days before you vote on the budget, but the next section says the budget has to be available for public review 20 days before you vote on it. So all the solicitors I've worked with historically have always said, err on the side of caution and have it advertised 20 days before you vote on it, so no one can question the process. So based on the board approving the preliminary budget tonight, we can advertise it Thursday in the Intelligencer, and we'd be in a position to vote on it anytime after December 22nd. So anytime after the 22nd, before the end of the year, you could vote on the budget.
Thursday's the first day that it would be, that it could go into the paper? Like it couldn't
Thursday would be
tomorrow
the,
or
no,
Wednesday?
it'd be Thursday would be the first day we get in the paper. We'll submit it to the paper tomorrow. It won't be published till Thursday.
So we can make it, so the earliest we can make it is the 23rd?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that calls for a advertisement specifically in the paper of general circulation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, no one here says a public meeting will be held on December 28th. That was our preliminary date that we offered up. Does someone want to make, we'd have to make a motion to change the date?
No, I don't think it requires a motion, just a consensus. We're going to have the majority of the board here to vote on the final budget.
So the earliest is the 23rd, so why don't we just take a show of hands of who wants to advertise, or the public meeting will be held on December 23rd? Show of hands.
23rd?
23rd. December 23rd.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 5, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Tom's in that hand up.
I'm short, I'm sorry.
The majority of the board, 10 commissioners, would be available the 23rd.
So then a public meeting will be held on December 23rd at 7 p.m.
But maybe the public's not available, excuse me. I was just thinking, isn't the public supposed to attend?
Well, the public would have the opportunity once we
Yeah, they would
advertise
have the
it.
opportunity, but I think most people up here know, I know we're all different, you know, we all worship different. I think most people do realize it's a holiday. I understand, but people, if you want them to show up and come to the meeting, and it is a public meeting, the 28th was a good night, we decided before, but tonight all of a sudden it's not. So,
Well, I think there's also a concern that between the holidays, there's a lot of people not around.
I think if they have that notice, it'll be more,
Depends on what public you're talking about.
well, if the public's going to, whatever.
So was it, the
By the
vote?
show of hands, it looks like the majority of the board would support the 23rd for the final budget meeting.
Okay, so a public meeting will be held on December 23rd at 7 p.m. at the Abington Township Administrative Building for the purpose of discussion and adoption of ordinance number 2105, setting the tax levy and appropriations for calendar year 2016.
What will be the
question.
time of that meeting?
7 o'clock.
7 p.m.
7 p.m.
7? Okay, thank you.
So December 23rd at 7 p.m.
7:00.
Okay, if there are any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Myers.
Quick question. At that final budget meeting on the 23rd, can a separate motion like tonight be made from the floor? How does that work? Either you vote for it or you vote against it, or can a separate motion be made? And you don't have to answer tonight, just, I would like to know before that meeting.
I'll get you, I'll confer with the solicitor and get you a legal opinion on that.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you for attending. The meeting's adjourned.
So if she would propose a different budget.
Yeah.